5. I'm Ruth Ann Norton. I'm the chair of the Maryland Commission on Lead Poisoning Prevention, which is supported by the Maryland Department of the Environment. If you're new to the meeting today, welcome. I hope in 25 we build a really robust focus on bringing this issue of lead poisoning, lead exposure further down the path to closure. I wanted to just take a couple of minutes in the opening of the meeting. Today is a National Day of Mourning in honor of President Jimmy Carter. I had the distinct honor of presenting Healthy Homes to President Carter in August of 2016 at the request of Habitat International at a Memphis, I guess, Habitat build. In the middle of August, where the temperatures were well into the high 90s, the 92-year-old president, I think, outworked both of the mayors and the now current mayor and all of the number of people who were involved in that. In his engineer hat and his bib overalls, we had a 45-minute box lunch to talk about the impact of healthy housing. And the president was gracious to listen to remarks and discussion. But when the 45 minutes was over, the 92-year-old former president got up and said it was time to go back to work. And he did. And I think it is a reflection of the commitment and service that we should all keep in mind, that the work we're doing to benefit others and to think outside of ourselves to the greater good of others, I hope we will keep in mind today and every day in honor of President Carter and his wife, Rosalind, and really appreciate that moment to just share that and ask that we all reflect on our service in his honor. As we go into 2025, we'll go into a new administration, both federally or federally as it relates to the work coming out of EPA, HUD, HHS, the Department of Energy, and all of those departments that have impact on lead through their work, whether it's making sure that we are addressing lead when we're addressing weatherization or clean energy, whether it's about lead in cinnamon and the fate of the FDA moving forward. And I know we'll all be working forward. I will say in the first Trump administration, budgets for lead poisoning prevention, lead hazard control actually went up. That is by no means a statement of any endorsement of that administration, but it is a fact of the matter that at least we were on a federal plan for lead poisoning strategic plan was produced. My point in this is that we have to continue to endeavor to work on these issues mission-wise, regardless of administration, try to advance where we can in any administration, because for families, it's about the work and it's about what we accomplish. EPA did just recently put up, and if Wendy, if you don't have the link, I'll certainly help get that to you. But EPA did release in the last day or two the 6 indicators of environmental health disparities, the first of which was blood lead levels, and adverse birth outcomes, childhood asthma exposure, life expectancy, and population in monitored counties meeting PM2 national ambient air quality standards. So there is a focus on lead moving forward as it on these indicators and the work of the good people at EPA. There is a bill which we will discuss today in brief in the Maryland General Assembly, has been filed thus far, which is SB 250, the Maryland Fees Omnibus Bill, to get the rightful support needed to the really our good partners here at the Maryland Department of the Environment. It will impact rental property owners to right size and adjust for over the years the fee associated with compliance It will move it to every 2 years to help efficiencies in that standpoint. And then there was also a long overdue ruling from EPA about lead in wheel weights from a 2009 filing in 24. EPA has declined to issue a final rule on that matter. So that will be revisited at some point. And lastly, as we begin today, before we do introductions, I just want to remind the public that may be online that we are still taking applications for the Thriving Communities Grant Program. It is to support building the capacity for environmental justice on issues like lead exposure, and related environmental justice issues throughout Region 3. So not only for those of us here in Maryland, but if you have partners in West Virginia, Pennsylvania, District of Columbia, Delaware, or Virginia, we are really trying to reach out, especially to tribal communities. If anyone here has that ability to connect with tribal communities or has relationships, please let us know. Rural communities, hard to reach communities, and hard to reach communities include areas of the Eastern Shore, Western Maryland, and even in Baltimore. On that note, Wendy, let's take roll call of our commissioners and say hello to everybody in the new year. And I want to say everybody looks a year younger going into 25, so I don't know what your secret sauce is there.
All right. Do you want them to introduce themselves, or do you just want me to go through who I see?
That would be great. Let's do an introduction. Let's start the year right. Let's
okay.
Go.
Allie Nestat.
Hi, I'm Allie Nestat. I am a parent advocate. My child had lead poisoning, and I'm happy to be here. And hopefully we can do really good this year. And I am here to help with anything.
Great.
Adam Skolnick. You're muted. And he just came on, so he's probably, I don't know if he's just.
Sorry about that. Adam Skolnick from the Maryland Multi-Housing Association, commission member. My apologies. Having some tech problems this morning.
Adam
Yeah.
Horacio Tablata said he saw you or talked to you recently, and it was a thrill for him, just so you know.
Yeah, we were sharing a corned beef sandwich together. It was moderately funny.
There you go.
He's a great guy.
Yep. Okay.
Barbara Moore.
Hi, I'm Barbara Moore. I'm a nurse practitioner and director for the lead poisoning program at Mount Washington Pediatric Hospital, commission member, and I apologize in advance. I need to drop off at 10 o'clock.
Barbara, can I ask one question for the public? What is the, and you may not be able to answer this, but I was asked recently what the average caseload is over at Mount Washington for children that you're seeing in your clinic.
So
over the course of a year.
Okay, so the year before we had 54 new referrals, and once we see the child once, we tend to see them once a month until their level starts coming down. So it gets pretty heavy. Last year, I think we had 35, 36 new referrals, and so far this year we have 2 new ones. On an average clinic day, we have 7 to 9 patients scheduled, and we have clinic once a week on Tuesday mornings.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for that.
Okay. Benita Cooper.
Good morning. Happy New Year. My name is Benita Cooper with the Maryland Insurance Administration, commission member.
Thank you.
Christina Poosh is usually on a call, and I do see a call logged in 917 and then ending in 23. You're muted though, but can you identify yourself? No.
I think we got a note that she may not be joining us. I got some note.
Okay, she may not be then. I don't know who's on that phone. All right, so let's go to Cliff Mitchell.
Morning, happy new year, everybody. It's great to be here. Clifford Mitchell, Maryland Department of Health, Environmental Health Bureau Director and Commission member.
Great. And Cliff, the lead testing kits that we got from the EPA, can we at some point in time know how they got deployed so we can get that back to EPA?
Yep, we can touch base on that.
That'd be great. Thank you so much.
Okay, we have Fred Banks.
Good morning. Fred Banks, Maryland Department of Environment, Lead Poisoning Prevention Program.
And Jacob is not with us today, so we'll go to Mangela.
Good morning. I'm Angela Paul from Office of Child Care, Maryland State Department of Education, Commission member. Thank you.
I don't, let's see. Oh, here we go. Michael, oh gosh.
Ikniowski.
Ikniowski. I will eventually get this.
Hey, everybody repeat after me. Ikniowski.
Ikniowski.
There you go. Now you all know it. I am officially appointed now.
Yay.
Governor signed me on and everything, so I'm here for good. I'm a pediatrician, retired from practice, and I'm the representative of the Maryland chapter of the American Academy of Pediatrics and the chairperson of the Environmental Health Committee for MDAAP.
All right.
Thank you, Doctor.
Nadia Hutchison.
Good morning, everyone, and Happy New Year. Sorry, my voice might go in and out. I'm recovering from a cold, but my name is Nadia Hutchinson. I'm live and based in Baltimore, run the Baltimore Just Transition Network, and organizer with Young Gifted and Green.
Welcome.
All right. Like I said, Nicola Tran is not going to be with us today. I don't see Nicole Hart on, so Ruth Ann, our chair.
Yep.
With the HHI.
Green and Healthy Homes Initiative, and thank you.
And last but not least, Susan Kleinhammer.
Good morning, everybody. Happy New Year. Susan Kleinhammer, commission member, accredited risk assessor, accredited training provider, owner of LedTech Services.
Do we have somebody from Mary Washington's office?
No, I don't see anybody on.
Okay.
And that's it. And we do have quorum, so we're good.
Okay, and I thought Senator Washington made such great contributions in the last meeting, so I want to make sure we reach out and at least can try to have somebody from her office. We are meeting at a time that makes it difficult because they go into session at 10, but I'll make sure to reach out to her. I did fail, Wendy, to mention that the Maryland Department of Housing and Community Development was awarded $2 million for a Healthy Homes production grant. This coming on top of their recent award on lead hazard control, I think is going to be very fundamentally important. So I wanted to congratulate Nicola and Jack Daniels for turning that tide and really having success toward more holistic, healthy housing. I would ask that we put a request out to ask the department to go over where they intend to distribute those funds across the state and how what the criteria on which they're going to make those grant funds available. And in fact, I'd love to have the commission invite all of the Healthy Home production and HUD award together so we can really see if there's a mapped out strategy that impacts lead across the state, and I'll work with folks to do that, but I hope we will do that and making sure they're working with our physicians, our clinical care, and our schools as well. All right, I guess we have the minutes to approve from the last meeting, and congratulations to all the new members who have been sworn in. Wendy, do you want to bring up the minutes there, if anybody on the screen? And has everyone had a chance to read the minutes? If you have any questions around the minutes, please raise them now. If not, could I get a motion, please, to approve the minutes?
Move to approve the minutes.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The minutes are adopted. I will also make note that many people have gotten outreach from a thing called Fred AI related to the commission. We're trying to track down exactly where that came from. I will say the notes were pretty good when I saw them, but we are looking at what that is. And if you want to be careful about clicking on something, please do, because it is not my understanding, Wendy, that wasn't sent out by you.
Correct.
But we're gonna make sure we know what the AI collection is on that. But I did I will say the notes did seem to capture the last meeting. Wendy, if you could, please, if you put up the agenda.
Yes.
And,
if
and
you don't-
do note, Wendy, I also did invite Grace Remu from EPA, if she would present the EPA release on the 6 indicators of environmental health for February. I'll let you know whether she can do that. Okay.
Can I make a brief announcement?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. We have about 46 people on this meeting. So just to let everybody know, because of our technical difficulties that we've had the past couple meetings, I'm actually going to be moving the meeting from that conference room that we're initially meeting in the first floor. We're now going to be meeting on the 6th floor Patuxent room. So you'll have to be escorted up. So I do ask that everybody who is attending in person to please arrive early so that we can get you upstairs and seated in the conference room.
And to help on that, Wendy, if it's okay, I will personally make sure we have good coffee and snacks if we need it for the next meeting when people come. And I hope we'll see as many people as reasonable in person.
And yes, if you can, please let me know via replying to the email that I send out if you are coming, so that we're sure to accommodate, with the seating in that room. So if you are not coming in person, you don't worry about having to reply. But if you are coming in person, we would certainly need to know that. So please reply back to that email.
All right.
And there is a note in the notes. I don't know who in the chat about fireflies. I don't know if you just posted that or Wendy
No,
did.
I did not. I don't know what that is. Yeah, I don't know what that is.
That's the AI thing. The email came from Firefly. That was in the address heading. So it's part of the AI thing that somehow we've gotten enrolled for. I don't know if it's something that the state did.
Yeah, no, it's not
Yeah,
the state.
no, I
Yeah.
can answer that because it's somebody associated with the call one way or another has activated it, and it gets into the call. Our Department of Information Technology actually has policies on AI transcription, and I'm sure that Wendy will have a conversation with her IT colleagues about how to inactivate that or deactivate that.
All right. And if anybody has activated it and just wants to be transparent about it, let us know. I think there's nothing we'll be talking about that we wouldn't want the public to know for sure, but I think it's just a matter of IT safety here. So definitely want to look at that. Upcoming legislation, I wanted to raise 2 things, and Nadia, you may be helpful to me on the second part of this, not to catch you off guard. The first is that that I did note SB 250, the Maryland Fees Omnibus Bill in rental property owners. That is a administration bill, I believe. Paula, Fred, MDE, do you all want to speak on that?
Sure. It's so that's the registration fee for the rental registration. It hasn't changed since I believe 2012. So it's just to let you know, we have about 70,000 property owners, a total of 140,000 units that we have to register, along with probably another 200,000 that are off the books that we have to track down. So the burden to make sure those properties are in compliance is it's a heavy one. And so we've been trying to increase the fee for the last 2.5 years. So we hope that not only we get the fee increase, and I believed before Tyler left, we were trying to do it also biannual. So it was one, it will give us a chance to sort of collect the fees, because we still get probably 1/3 of our fees by check. So if you can imagine several thousand checks coming in the mail, and they have to be manually input into our system right now. So it's a administrative burden for our staff to kind of keep up with. Camille, the current fee is $30. So that's a $30 fee. I believe it's the increase is going to $100 every other year.
120.
Okay, 120.
It's a
Thanks.
doubling. It's a doubling of the fee.
Yeah.
I don't know if I can't see the chat, Wendy, so it'd be helpful if people do come up in the
Yes,
chat.
yep, okay.
But Fred, I think two things would be helpful going into the legislative session, right? One, what would have been the cost, just the inflationary cost of that? Why the doubling, right? So that does not seem arbitrary in review in the legislature to help on this. Would love to hear on the property owner side. I love the fact that you're going to every 2 years. I think that'll be helpful efficiency for you all and for potentially on the property owner side. But what are the risks of that, right? If we're not kind of checking in with people. And I would say I recently was notified of an action that you all are taking on falsified inspection certificates where there's pretty significant case that MDE is bringing action on falsified lead-free certificates. This is a problem that we saw many years back where inspectors would phony up certificates and actually hand them out to owners who would buy them and then turn them in. I think this is going to be hitting the news media pretty soon if it hasn't. If there's a deep look happening on this. It is really good work to be on top of that because families rely on this inspection service. They rely on the compliance as safe. And I think we know that we saw not terribly long ago, the family who relied on going into a property thinking it was safe and ending up with kids that hit lead levels of 97, and a really significant case there in Washington County, other cases. So how important this system and the strength of this system is, and in light of budget cuts, we cannot afford to break the protection systems down here. But Adam, I saw you came on screen, got your handsome face there. So do you have a comment on this bill from a property owner standpoint? You're on mute, sir.
My apologies.
No.
We're still reviewing it. I mean, I think it's pretty unlikely that we're going to be supportive. It doesn't mean we're not supportive of an increase. It's the 100% increase that's, I think, concerning. And that was our dialogue last year. So, but we're still meeting. We'll probably know more as of our legislative committee meeting on Monday.
Fred, am I right that this is an administrative bill, right? Coming from the administration?
Correct.
Okay. All right. Any other thoughts on this? I personally, as a commission member, am very much in favor of this bill, the need for it, the need to support the staffing, the importance of the work at MDE. I'd like to get a temperature as to whether other commission members would want to be in support of this and whether we want to take a position on this bill. Any thoughts from our members of the commission?
I support us supporting this bill.
And Ruth Ann, let me just add, the last 2 years, we looked at the percentage of elevated blood lead levels for properties that were registered, and it was significantly lower than the ones that weren't registered. So we think that the rental registration, having that property registered, is a good tool for us to kind of make sure that the property is in compliance. So
I couldn't agree more. I think this has been all the way back. Chris Corzine might be the only person on this long enough to, or maybe Paula, to remember the study that the University of Maryland did many years ago around the difference between those properties that were registered and those were not registered in the impact. If an owner is going through the process of registration, it does show an inclination to compliance and really paying attention to this. And I don't think any of our property owners on the call would disagree with that, the responsibility on that. You know, I trust that the department has gone through an economic analysis of why you're looking at this fee. I don't know, Fred, if you could talk, or you or Paula or somebody can talk to that, but I assume there's been some budget projection on the need for this, but it's not a bill that can continue to linger. We need to get you some support here.
Yeah, I don't have any details right now as far as the economic impact, but we have looked at it as far as the number of staff that have decreased because we just can't afford to keep that many people in rental registry based on the change in inflation. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think, listen, I'm in, I mean, as a commission member, do I think the fee should be increased? Sure. I'm in favor of that. It's about the amount of the increase that, you know, is my trepidation. I mean, the one comment I'll make is I don't know that doubling the fee is going to get more compliance. That seems a tad bit counterintuitive. You know, I mean, you're in essence doubling the fee and taxing the fee on the people that are actually trying to do the right thing other than potentially going lead free. You know, it's the bad guys that always slap a black eye on, you know, rental property owners that are trying to do the right thing. So,
yeah, you know, so Adam, to that point, and if there is somebody from the AG's office or your Chris's office online, is there a way to almost in alignment increase the fees and penalties that are charged for non-compliance here? And is there some wisdom in that? Because I think, I will say respectfully that I think Adam raises a point here, which is for those who are not complying is really our issue, right? And it is always, I think, in our tax system in the U.S., right? It's responsible people pay the taxes and the fees, and how do we balance that? But I don't know if Chris or others. I'm asking Chris if he would come on and maybe give us some insight on that.
What exactly is the question, Ruth Ann?
So the question really is, Chris, in looking at the legislation to increase the fees for compliant owners, right, who pay for registration fees, SB 250, I think we all see the need to do that and cost adjust from 2012. But is there also an equal opportunity to increase the punitive fees for those who fail to comply?
I assume you're talking about the penalties associated with failing to comply.
Correct.
I mean, you're asking, is there an opportunity to increase those? I mean, that would be, you know, legislation would be required, obviously, and I don't know if the department's going to do that right now, but I mean, obviously, they were doubled about 10 years ago, I believe. So that's already been done once. It used to be $250 per day for failing to get a certificate for a property. That's now $500. So it has been done. I don't know that raising them would really, I mean, it's already $500 a day. It's pretty high already, but you know, maybe that's something the department would want to look at. I'm not sure.
Chris, what is the success rate in the collection of those fees? Do you have some sense that you could share with the commission?
In the collection of the fees or the collection of penalties?
Well, both. I mean, it would be, I think, and maybe I'm asking other commissioners to weigh in here, but I would love to understand the success rate of getting units to be safer. That's first and foremost, because that's what matters, right? And the second is on the collection of fees or the success of completion of the enforcement actions for those that are found to be out of compliance. Does that make sense to folks?
Yeah, so I can speak to the fees.
Yeah, I was gonna say, really, the department could speak to the fees, because our office doesn't really deal with debts and outside of, obtaining judgments, and that gets sent to state central collections. So that's really the two sources to get that information, would be central collections and the program regarding collection fees.
Who would have the
So-
answer on the number of units that get made safer as the result of enforcement action that truly have been made safer?
I think
So,
Fred would be the best to answer that. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Chris.
yeah,
Nice to talk to you.
in 2023, there was approximately 11,000 property owners that were not in compliance with the rental registration. It went up to 14,000 last year. So I think that's part of it. To address Adam's concern, as far as there's still more properties that aren't on our radar as far as being unregistered, and we don't know where we are. We are working with SDAT to try to partner on a way to identify rental properties that don't notify us. But it's one, and I understand when the situation where we are essentially charging the people that are in compliance, but there are significant, if everybody registered their properties, we could lower the fees. But there's a large population of rental owners that don't register their properties that we depend on investigations and unfortunately notifications of elevated blood levels to kind of identify, oh, this is a rental property, to track that information down. So we're sort of chasing the cart, and so it's a difficult situation. But
I'm wondering, Fred, and I see Susan, your hand will come to you in just 1 second. I'm wondering if there isn't some sort of joint, really just focus campaign that organizations like GHHI and Young, Gifted, and Green and property owners and all can come together, and maybe the physicians, everybody come together and look at to say, how do we help identify those who are not registered, moving them to action to register? Because you said something significant too, which is often the case, right? If the law is fully applied and fairly applied, we'd be in a different position on need of revenue here. What can we do to support the state in getting people into registration? Let me go to Susan and then Dr. Ikonowski.
Thanks, Ruth Ann. Two-part question. I wondered if there was some way to track it by those counties that had a local rental registration requirement. Because what I'm seeing is that, in counties that don't have a local rental registration requirement, I would assume that you don't have as good registration with the state regulations. And number two, how about those limited lead frees that are no longer in compliance? They are now required, because they did not renew the limited lead free, they are required to register those properties. And I do not see any action being taken against limited lead frees that have expired.
Yeah, look, I can't, Susan, I'm going to jump in and say, your supposition makes sense, but I don't think it's actually true, because I would be willing to bet that Baltimore City, for example, has a huge number of non-licensed, non-compliant, under the radar rentals that are a problem, but they have a relatively robust rental registration, rental licensing regime. I mean, it's logical to think that it would be that way, but I'm not sure it really works that way, because I think it's a lot more about the housing stock than it is what regulations aren't in compliance, aren't there. Excuse me.
But if you had a local county rental registration, like I don't think there's one in Hartford County. I'm not sure if there's one in Anne Arundel County. But if you had, it would take the burden financially to some extent off the state if you had enforcement at a county level to make sure that there were rental licenses. And a part of that rental license for affected properties would be a lead certificate.
Yeah, I hear you, but it doesn't work that way, right?
Okay,
I mean,
okay. You know better.
in reality, look, whether a local jurisdiction wants to have a licensing regime or not is up to the local jurisdiction, and they are what they are. But the MDE getting, I mean, it's way more about, it's the same dialogue we've been having for years about the contractors, right? If the city has the data and uses the data and submits the data to MDE, and MDE's database can collate it, then amen, that would be great. But in the reality, it doesn't seem to work like that. I mean, I think we all wish it would, right? And they would all, and all these databases would talk, and it would be very simple. Here, Adam owns an apartment community. It's licensed, it's regulated, it's got its lead-free certificate, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But we've never been able to get all the locals and the state jurisdictions to be properly communicative to streamline the systems. So it doesn't mean we shouldn't try and do it. We should, but it's just not reality right now.
Gotcha.
We have some more hands raised.
Yeah, we do. And I also want to say, as we go to those hands, maybe Camille or Shanika, who used to be at the city, could really talk about how the city, right, has a rental registry and what they're doing in alignment. We'd love to get, this may drive people crazy when I say it, but if we had universal landlord licensing across the state with standards, it would be a whole lot easier. But let's go to Dr. Kanowski. And you're on mute, sir, I believe. And thank you, Wendy.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, question for Mr. Banks and one for Mr. Skolnick. For Mr. Banks, what kind of expense does MDE have in terms of staffing for enforcing the lead registrations by the rental owners? How many people do you have who are able to go to non-compliant renters and try to get them to have their units inspected and registered? And what kind of budget does the department have for that?
So we currently have that unit for rental registration is eight people with a supervisor, and they're primarily focused on managing the hotline. People call in with a lot of questions, how do I register my property, and then taking that information and registering those properties. So they're sort of dealing with the people that call in to get registered, and then also mailing out notifications of non-compliance and notices of violations, to actually go out to check vacancies to see if properties are out of compliance. That's something that the inspectors do. And unfortunately, when we get to sending inspectors out for compliance issues, that is less the focus. More of the inspector focus is focusing on investigating elevated blood levels at the property. So they sometimes go hand in hand. When the inspector's sent out to a property because of a elevated blood level, they'll check before they go out, they'll check the with rental registry to see the compliance of that property and sort of tie that investigation together. Initially, when inspectors are hired as what we call ECS ones, they're not allowed to do environmental investigation, so they spend probably their first year doing compliance. But once they get into being risk assessors, their focus is on prioritizing elevated blood levels. So there's really not a lot of staff available to go out and check vacancies. And to be honest with you, it's we would need, with the number of rental properties, we would need a significant force of individuals to go out and check vacancies. It's just, sort of like standing on the beach and there's sharks out there, and there's a lot of them out there, but you got one spear, so you got to figure out, let me try to grab the biggest, baddest one, and hopefully the word gets out that MD's out there looking for people for non-compliance, and they sort of come into compliance out of fear. that we're going to get them, but that's not, that hasn't been the case as of yet. So we're trying to do a lot more outreach and education in conjunction with GHHI, and the importance of, once again, the importance of having those properties in compliance, because it's less likely to result in a poisoned child or family member. So, but
do renters have any recourse if their house is not inspected?
Yep. So we do get a significant number of complaints from renters if they've identified chip and peel and flake and paint. We do work with our communications office to send out monthly notifications to the public, about awareness and education about what you should look for. And on our website, there's a tenant's rights form to inform the tenant of what their rights are, and then a process for issuing a notice of defect to our department. And we always say, if you call, we'll come. So probably about a third of our investigations are tenant complaints, and we'll come out and investigate. And generally, we do find issues. So.
Okay, and for Mr. Skolnick, does your organization have any means of encouraging non-compliant landlords, property owners to comply?
Great question. Number one, please call me Adam. My running joke for years has been Mr. Skolnick is my long dead grandfather. So the answer is, and we the Maryland Multi-Housing Association, who I represent, which represents the owners and managers of about 215,000 rental units, predominantly in apartment communities throughout the state of Maryland, minus Montgomery and Prince George's counties. We've been getting the word out since literally 1996. So I can tell you that the apartment community rental housing environment is in compliance or super in compliance, is very worried about it, wants to do the right thing by the residents of those apartment communities and per the state and the law. I think that I would hope that Fred would agree that most of their problems occur with smaller landlords and comparatively, 1 and 2Z unit properties as opposed to large apartment communities. And a lot of that is the way the law was, written back in the day, and the penalties that were increased, as Chris mentioned, 10 or 12 years ago, whatever that was. And, our association getting the word out that, 1, this is the law, and 2, this is the right thing to do. And a huge percentage of our members actually have spent the money to get the properties to be lead free. I mean, they've gone out of their way to spend because they just don't want to have to deal with the bureaucracy. And it's the right thing to do. How to get the word, Ruth Ann's heard me say this a million times, bad guys don't join trade associations. They're bad guys, right? They don't want to hear that. They don't want the peer pressure of their peers in the industry who are doing the right things. That doesn't mean we can't help get the word out, and we're happy to. And it doesn't mean we don't work with with organizations that have smaller membership bases to talk about the right things to do. And there's some of those throughout the state that we still work with. I don't know that there's some, magic bullet solution for this problem.
Thank you.
I will say, I do think there's going to have to be some real community-based action that amplifies and raises the identification of non-compliant property owners. That, we need to be able to identify those property owners. I can tell you in Baltimore City, we would love to either get responsible owners to take the place of non-compliant, irresponsible owners, but we need to do something that actually connects on this enforcement. I will just quote Matt Ammon from HUD, and Tara Radosevich, who reminded me that we can spend billions and billions of dollars on abatement over the course of time, but significant enforcement actions actually can have greater impact than giving away money. And the money is important to help people who need it to strategically invest in improving properties, but enforcement actions often will deliver stronger outcomes. So who do we have also in the queue here? I thought Paula put her hand down. Paula, did you want to say something?
Just to highlight the rental registration, have done a comprehensive list and just recently updated a comprehensive list of every county and municipality in the state of Maryland that has a rental registration license requirement. And I mean, I'm not looking at it right now, but there are a significant amount of counties and municipalities. Over the years, I've worked with them to require compliance with the state laws, which is required under the political subdivision, that they can't issue a license in their prospective jurisdiction without demonstrating compliance with the state laws. And I can tell you with some assurity that out of all the jurisdictions that have a rental registration requirement, they are ensuring compliance with the state laws prior to issuing a license, with the exception of a handful of smaller jurisdictions. And Baltimore City does require compliance with the state laws before they're issued a license.
Mm-hmm. That's good. All right. So the question on the table is, do we want to support this particular piece of legislation? And if we feel we have a desire to do that, if we want to do that with any caveat to that. I think the second is that I'm asking the department if they can provide a report at the next meeting reasonably to talk about sort of the effectiveness of the enforcement actions and in making houses safer and the like. But Susan, you have your hand up.
Thanks, Ruth Ann. Just if you could clarify, because I'm a little confused. The rental registration initially started out at $15 per unit, and then at some point it went up to $30 per unit. Now you mentioned $120. I didn't understand that. $120 a unit?
That is what the bill is from the Moore administration and the Department of the Environment's bill.
So that's four times greater.
Excuse me, let me finish.
Okay.
Okay. SB 250, it's the Maryland Fees Omnibus Bill. It includes the increase in rental property owner affected property registration to $120 per unit to be paid every 2 years. The net effect proposed by the department is to move that fee from $30 a unit to $60 a unit on an annual basis. Owners would have to pay only on a biannual or every other year basis. So that is the bill as presented. If MDE wants to correct me on anything, please do so. And what I'm trying to do is take the temperature of, I'm going to call for an informal vote right now of those who would support endorsing this bill as a commission in support of the department's bill.
So why don't everybody raise their hand on the computer? That way we can get that reading of who would do that. All right, Susan Kleinhammer, AZ chapter president. Not sure who that is.
Who is that?
It's Nicole Hart.
Oh, okay.
The connection issues.
Okay, thanks.
And this is Cliff. You know, this is always this is an administration bill. So obviously, as a member of the administration, I'm supporting my fellow agency, as would be expected.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Let me just read through these hands real quick. Susan Kleinhammer, Nicole Hart, Ruth Ann Norton, Fred Banks, Nadia Hutchinson, Christina Push, Ali Nestet, Michael Ikwanowski, Mangela Paul, Benita Cooper. Those are the hands that are raised.
Yes, it does appear that we have the majority of the commission in favor. So I am going to ask for a motion to support SB 250 on behalf of the commission. If I can get a motion, please.
I'll make a motion.
Thank you. Can I get a second?
Second.
All right. The vote will go this way. Please take your hand down. If your hands, have we got all hands down?
Yeah, they're all down.
All right. Those in favor, please raise your hand on the thing, and then we'll do those against and those abstaining. So
And just to clarify, to restate the motion,
the commission will send a letter in support of SB 250 as proposed by the administration.
So in favor is Fred, Susan, Ruth Ann, Christina, Benita, Nadia, Michael, Mangela, Ali, and Cliff. I'm going to lower all the hands.
Great. Okay. Those who wish to abstain first.
Any abstentions, raise your hand.
And those who wish to oppose.
Adam.
It's a friendly opposition. Okay. Thank you. The commission will send a letter in support, and for the department, I am willing to testify in support of the bill when it comes to hearing. And we do understand the owners will be looking for potentially a different level of fee here. But we do want to make sure that this is supported and move forward. And thank you. We will equally work as a commission to look at strengthening any other supports for enforcement actions. So thank you.
Chris,
Clarify, the lead-free fee will be raised to $50 as well. Okay, thank you, Chris, for that.
All right, just a point of fact, another penalty for the people we really want to support.
Understand that, and we will ask the legislative committee to join us in looking at how do we build incentives or work to go after the non-compliant. And I will urge this committee, this commission, and those listening. I put up a note in the chat. I'm going to ask GHHI to help convene this, but we need a statewide campaign to out and illuminate the non-compliant owners and work on ways to bring them into compliance, whether it's through education or enforcement or simply outing them to bring forward. Thank you, Susan, and then we're going to move on to the next issue. So we've concluded the vote.
Thanks, Ruth Ann. Just on the aside, I mean, these rules that are more than 20 years old now. And my concern is lead freeze. That, you know, in the state of Maryland and maybe in, it was a compromise to allow enclosure in a lead-free inspection. Now, over time, 20 years, those enclosures may no longer be enclosing the surfaces that have lead. And so I think as a commission, we also need to look at maybe a follow-up to those lead-frees that are now so old that maybe there's lead exposures even in lead-free certificate properties.
So, Susan, could I ask that maybe you and maybe Chris White or anyone else get together and be able to present either in February or March, and probably more likely February if we want to do anything legislatively here. But I think people need to understand that issue. If there's some visuals that can be helpful in that, to anything that would help us to really modernize the statute responsibly, right, of the issue that you're raising. I think there's some education for the commission, potentially, I may be wrong, to really understand this nuance in the law.
Sure.
Susan, I understand your point, but I mean, I think this really falls on Fred to some extent. Are there actually kids that are getting poisoned in those properties? And if there
Yes.
are, then your point is
Yeah.
spot on. But if they're not, then
Yeah, we've had just before the holiday, we had 2 that came back to back. As a matter of fact, we had a fast track with a kid, I think had a 74 that was in a lead-free home. And so we're seeing it. We're identifying those properties, that we're trying to identify some variables so that we're not just looking at all lead-frees. But yeah, we have noticed that.
Where was that 74, Fred?
I want to say Prince George's County.
and it was coming from the home as opposed to some other source, and it was coming from lead paint.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look at inspections, I mean, even the way inspections were done 20 years ago is different than how the inspections are done now. So to go back, I mean, it's just the evolution of this industry, in every aspect has changed considerably. And the other thing is that even in lead-free certificate or in lead-free houses, the quality of cleanliness contributes to the amount of lead dust if the house, even if lead-free, not been well maintained and is not cleaned, because lead is everywhere. And I mean, it is such a complex problem.
I understand that. And Susan, I'm going to ask again, I think the best thing that I'm going to urge this commission to do, right, is let's get concrete proposals and come back with concrete proposals with the background and explanation of what it is, education on that, so we can move forward thoughtfully. And actually, what I want to turn this into is while it's a good discussion forum, we need to be strategically moving action. Dr. Mitchell.
So I want to just build on your last comment, Ruth Ann, because I think as we've discussed before, we've reached a kind of an interesting inflection point from my point of view in the discussion about lead poisoning writ large. And I think that as I think we've discussed in previous meetings, it feels, given both sort of macro changes in the administration, thinking a little bit about where lead sources are, where CDC is, and where we may be headed with respect to national and state blood lead levels, and what we've seen in terms of source contribution in older versus newer communities and in changes in the population, that this is part of a much larger conversation about what the state's strategy is moving forward with respect to lead poisoning. And I think I would just say that it is my hope that the Lead Commission can actually take a step back from the sort of smaller agency-specific discussions that I engage in, that Dr. Banks engages in, to think about the strategy for the state over the next 15 years with respect to lead poisoning, because I think that's the kind of discussion that we are uniquely, as a commission, capable of having. I don't think it's about as important as the discussion is about sort of fees and other issues. It feels to me as though there is a much more important strategic question to consider in terms of where the state goes and where the state's strategy ought to go. And that I would suggest, while it's important, obviously, to talk about legislation and other issues, it feels like that larger conversation is something that no one else is having.
Yeah, and I could not agree more. And it's been on my mind, so I think you're just teasing this out for me. I think a couple of years ago we tried. I want no judgment on the success or not success of the meeting that we did on doing a strategy, but I am going to try to work with Fred, Paula, Wendy, and others and propose to the commission that we do a strategic planning day, and we bring in experts, and we do that relatively sooner rather than later, because I think we owe Governor Moore, who is deeply committed to the prevention of childhood lead poisoning, has been for the 30 plus years that I've known this gentleman. And we owe it to the governor's office, to all of the agencies, and to the communities, a strategy on that. So I will ask if anybody is interested in working on that with me, and Cliff, I'll tap you as I on this as well. But I say we put that together, and we hear these issues out, right? We hear them out well with that larger strategy, right? Because I got to remind folks, I think this is still a fact too. We don't have any kids who've been diagnosed as lead poison because of their water in the state of Maryland. And Nadia, thank you for that as well, but could not agree more. I know we have other things on our agenda that Wendy's probably anxious for us to get to, but Fred, I'll take you, I promise, as the last comment on this. With a note.
And I hope this doesn't get us back in the weeds, but was Susan was talking about lead-free certificates. Every time I hear lead-free, I cringe, because I want to look at a bigger issue that I want to get rid of that term altogether. So we know that pre-78 homes are less likely to be lead-free at all. So just to use that term, I think it sends a false narrative to the public and the families, and that,
I actually believe other states are moving in that direction too. And Fred, I think there's a conversation coming up with the CDC lead advisory group. We ought to bring that to them as well, as we think about the strategy. And thank you, Susan, for your comment. This has been quite a good discussion. Let's turn this into action. Cliff, thank you for their extraordinarily good suggestion there. Wendy, what is our agenda? What is the next item on our agenda, please?
Okay, I'm going to share my screen. And so I just wanted to kind of go over for next month what the, reporting calendar is. So far for February, we'll have legislation discussion, I guess, be the first thing. But Ruth Ann, you had mentioned about contacting a presenter for February. So I'll touch base with you to make sure that gets done. And then MDE effective.
Yeah, I would add to that too. I'd like to come back with an outline for a strategic planning day with the commission no later than that meeting, if not before. So let's look at that, and we can start the framework of that on that day, I think.
Okay. And then I had just heard in the meeting, MDE to do an effectiveness of enforcement actions in making houses safer. So we'll do that for February. And then March, Susan and Chris White discussing about lead-free certificates.
Well, I called on Chris White. He's in the audience there. I hope he'll help out on that, and appreciate and thank him in advance if he will be such a good guy to help out on that.
So I'll touch base with you, Susan and Chris, about that. Is there anything else that anybody wanted to add for February or March?
And I would say Fred is in that too. This whole
Fred,
idea, of suspending the lead-free determination.
Anything else that anybody else wants to add for February or March? If not, we'll go to the next agenda item.
Yep. And there's a presentation coming up in the next agenda item, I believe. Is that right?
Oh, yeah. Hold on, let me. So Tim Rule from Water Supply is going to give us some updates on lead testing in schools. Tim, did you want me to share the screen for your presentation, or did you want to take over the PDFs?
And hey, Tim, thank you. One quick thing. I unfortunately have an obligation today that I have to get to. So if I could, I'd like to ask Fred Banks if he would take over as chair, because I always go to Cliff, and next time I'm going to ask Nicole Hart. So warning on that, Nicole. But Fred, could you take the role of chair from this point forward so I can get to my appointment?
Yep, I got it.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Tim, I appreciate you presenting. I will review your slides and No disrespect that I have to leave, but I thank you.
Thank you. Let me
Thank you.
get this. Let me try sharing my screen. It's good to know that there's a backup if this won't work.
Yes.
But let's give it a try here. How's
You're
this show? Good.
Yep, that's
Yeah, I
good.
was telling Wendy earlier that I've had nothing but bad luck trying to do an actual PowerPoint presentation over Google Meet. And I know I'm not unique in that. So thought I'd go with a PDF today. So I'm glad to see it's working.
Do you mind
Okay.
if anybody interrupts you throughout, or would you like to have all comments and questions held to the end?
Well, if there's a clarifying question, what do you mean by this term or whatever, please feel free to ask it. If it's more of a discussion item, then it's probably better held to the end. But really, whatever shape it takes should be fine. Okay. Okay. Again, my name is Tim Rule. I'm with the Lead and Copper and Drinking Water Division in Maryland Department of the Environment. And I am going to be talking about the initiative that we have for testing for lead in drinking water in schools. And let me get this straight. I kind of want to, I've given updates in the past, and it's been quite a while. So I thought that I would start just with a little background, the history of the initiative. The law that started this, we call it HB 270, that was passed in 2017, became effective in June of 2017, and the regulations became effective in April of the following year, 2018. Initially, the action level, the point above which action needs to be taken, was set at 20 parts per billion of lead in a 250 mil sample of drinking water. And I'll go into the sample collection and analysis in a little bit more detail in a couple of slides. That was based on the guidance in the EPA's 3 Ts for testing for drinking water in schools. They did recommend an action level of 20 parts per billion. That was I believe that was like a mid-2000s era iteration of that report, and they did update it. And there were, in the updated version, there was no specific action level that was any longer recommended. Now, in 2019, a law was passed that expanded the applicability of Healthy School Facility Fund, which is a state fund in Maryland. A lot of it goes to updating HVAC systems and roofing and, the stuff that keep the schools running. But this law added remediation to address lead in drinking water as one of the things that has that can be used for, and it has been used for that in several award sessions since then. And then in 2021, legislation was passed, that lowered the action level to 5 parts per billion, and it had a notification and remediation requirement. And I'll go into the notification stuff just a slide or so. Excuse me a second. Pardon me. But the outlets that had initially tested above 5 parts per billion, but below that 20 of the initial action level, they needed to be notified and remediated or permanently removed. So that's basically the legislation. In terms of applicability of the testing requirements, it applies to schools that receive water from a public water supply. It does not apply to schools that have their own wells, which are classified as their own public water supply. And those would already be testing under the federal lead and copper rule. And just as an aside, that is in the process of changing and being upgraded, and the testing requirements in schools for which that applies are going to be upgraded as well. We can discuss that in another presentation, maybe if that's what people want. It applies to all public, non-public, and charter schools that serve students in grades pre-K through K-12. It applies to all school buildings that are occupied, whether that's permanently or occasionally by students. And at the time that this was enacted, I do need to give the legislators a bit of a shout out, because it really was ahead of its time compared to a lot of other initiatives that were voluntary or just a subset, a couple of outlets or a one and done testing. So I think that the legislature got a lot of things right initially. Now onto the testing requirements. I want to point out that the sampling protocol is a little different from what's done under the lead and copper rule, which specifies a 1 liter sample. The idea here is to identify drinking water outlets that have any potential to cause or contribute to lead in drinking water. The thinking is that the public water systems also do testing under the lead and copper rule, which will identify issues of corrosivity, system-wide. So we're really trying to get a little bit smaller scale with this. It applies to all drinking water or consumption outlets, which includes kitchen sinks that are used for cooking and preparation, or anything other than just hand washing, ice machines, hot drink vending machines, things like that, and any other outlet, regardless of what type of fixture it is, that's known to be used for drinking, food preparation, or other consumption. So if there are sinks that we know are being used, and this happens a lot in schools that are boarding schools with dorms, we require all the sinks to be tested in there, because it's a little different than in a day school. The testing has to be done every 3 years unless the school building has been granted a waiver from future testing. It needs to be done during the regular school year when school is in session. And the reason for that is to be representative of actual conditions under which there's the possibility for the students to be consuming any lead. And it is a 250 mil first draw sample with an 8 to 18 hour stagnation period. At 250 milliliters it's just a little bit more than 1 cup. So when you do that sample, you're getting the water that has been stagnated in that drinking water, in that outlet, and a little bit that's stagnating in the pipe behind it. Now, if there is contribution from solder or service lines, that would also show up, and follow-up testing post-remediation would be able to identify and narrow that down. Somebody had a hand up just a second
Yeah,
ago.
we just had a question from Christina. Why would a school be granted a waiver from testing?
There are 3 different types of waivers. One is if the school has tested and all of the outlets have tested below the action level of 5 parts per billion. Another is if the school uses bottled water, provides bottled water for all drinking and consumption purposes, or if the school demonstrates that it meets the definition of a lead-free building with regard to plumbing. That would have to be including the service line and either a complete renovation after January 4th of 2012 or new construction after that date.
Thank you.
Sure. The 250 mil is basically really kind of a worst case scenario, because what we're really trying to do is target these individual outlets, identify them, and remove them or remediate them. The analysis has to be conducted at a state certified laboratory. The department maintains and, constantly updates, takes some labs off and puts new ones on. The list of labs that are certified for analyzing lead in drinking water. It also has to be, the samples need to be conveyed to the lab within a 14-day period with proper chain of custody requirements met. And let's see, I think, will this move on for me? Yeah. Okay, so now what happens if there are elevated levels of lead found? The first thing is that within 24 hours of the school receiving the lab report, the school is required to remove access to the outlet. Usually the labs automatically send out the reports by email pretty much the same day or within a day of when the analysis occurs. So it's a pretty quick turnaround. The removal of access can't just be valving something off, because that can be turned back on again. And we do know of instances prior to this initiative where that did happen, where in some school systems, they tested for lead, they were elevated, they switched to bottled water, and they just turned the valves off. And then years later, they got different staff in the school and they just turned them back on. And so we ensure that it's a little bit more rigorous than that. Within 5 school days of receiving the reports for the elevated outlets, flush samples are to be collected. That is to inform the possibility of remediation, if automated flushing would be good for that. It's also to make sure that it's really the outlet that's the source of the lead and not a service line or some other source. What we have noticed with this is that the vast majority of the time, the flushed samples, which is running it for 30 seconds before collecting the sample, they're usually below the reporting level of the laboratory, and almost always, I don't want to say always, but the vast majority of time, they're below the action level. And that is encouraging, because that is more representative of what the students and staff are likely to be exposed to drinking the water in the schools. So we were glad to see that. Within 30 days, the notification must be, within 10 days, notification, 10 school days, needs to be provided to parents, guardians, teachers, and other school staff. That can be printed and sent home with the students. Typically, schools have email listservs, distribution lists set up with the parents for notifications of all kinds of things. They're sent out that way. They may be sent out in more than one way. That notification also must go up onto the school's website within 30 school days. There are still some schools that don't have a website, and this would not apply in that case. That's somewhat unusual. And we do have requirements for the notification. We offer templates for the schools to use for the notifications. Many of them use that. And sometimes they will add additional factual information, such as what they may be doing for remediation. But it has to include these elements.
There's a question from Nadia.
Yes.
Is there any notification? Is there any notification given if there's any amount of lead, but it is below elevated lead levels? And has that ever happened?
Well, the notification must include the test results and the locations of the outlets with elevated levels of lead. What we encourage schools to do, both in the interest of transparency more than anything else, is to post all the lead testing results. And many of them do that regardless of whether there are elevated levels of lead or not. It's basically a good idea for the schools too, because it's usually only 1 or 2 outlets that are elevated, and it can give some peace of mind. So that usually does happen. We recommend it. Again, just transparency is a good thing. We also require the inclusion on the notification of a summary of state and federal drinking water standards relative to lead. There's information about Maryland's law in schools, and there's information about the lead and copper rule. There's an explanation of health effects of lead, sources of exposure, steps that can be taken to reduce the exposure to lead in drinking water. For example, just simply running the outlet for a little bit until the water temperature stabilizes before using it first thing in the morning is that can go a long way. They need to tell what the immediate actions were and what the next step is going to be. That basically includes the removal of the outlet from service and any remediation that they have identified. They may not have that information immediately because the remediation, there are a number of different ways of doing it, and it can be expensive. So it's not always done immediately. Sometimes they have to just close the outlets off and address the remediation issue when the school's budget is renewed for the following year. The school's contact information is also required so that there can be follow-up if needed, if parents have questions. And then the next thing is, sorry about my voice here, what happens after the results come to MDE? And we do a very thorough review of the results. We validate the data. We need to ensure that everything is complete and accurate. One of the earlier steps in the overall testing process is that the school must create a floor plan identifying where the drinking water outlets and any other outlets, consumption or non-consumption outlets are. And they're required to do a walkthrough the day before. They submit with the results. We require them to submit a laboratory results reporting form, which indicates the identification of the outlets, the locations. So we go through all that. We make sure that everything that's on the floor plan has indeed been tested, that everything matches up on the lab reporting form, on our results reporting form, the spreadsheet that they send in, on the sample collection reforms that the samplers have been filling out. So it's a pretty thorough review. We make sure that the samples were collected correctly following proper protocols. And as an aside, we've just in the past year or so, we've developed a number of how-to videos for a number of the aspects of the overall testing process, including doing a floor plan, collecting the samples, follow-up notification, etc. And we are finding that we think that's pretty helpful, that the schools seem to agree, and it makes things a little bit more smooth. One of the things that we have often seen that we try to stave off ahead of time, but sometimes can't do it, is that there may be outlets that share a common inlet, high-low water fountains, for example, or combination sinks. And in order to get a proper first draw sample, those need to be collected on separate days. So we review the floor plans. We discuss things with the school staff if we have any questions. We review plumbing specifications on specification charts from manufacturers of different outlets. So we really do a deep dive. We make sure that the stagnation time is accurate. We make sure that the school has accurately indicated the time that the water was last used and the actual time of the sample collected. And we mean that for each individual sample. If you have a high and low water fountain, and one of them says 606 and the other one is 609, that lets us know that that one that was collected at 609 is not a valid first draw sample. so we can act on that. We make sure that the results have been submitted to a laboratory within the 14-day time window. We make sure that that lab has and maintains its certification for the analysis of lead in drinking water. We make sure that the school has properly responded in terms of the notification, removal of outlet, and eventually giving us the remedial plan of action and following through with that. So it does entail a lot of back and forth with the schools, and we've gotten a lot better at it as we've gone along. We've really learned a lot. Okay, next. This is a summary of what is on our webpage, and we update this periodically. One of the things that I want to point out is these are validated test results. So this is everything that's gone through the whole gamut of what was just on the previous slide. Schools have sent us a lot of other stuff, and it's not to say that they've done things wrong, but it just takes a long time to go through, and they may have done everything right, but be missing one form or something, and that would be the school. The results would not be considered validated. So these numbers here are a little lower than what we would say if we were, looking at the universe of test results that have been submitted. Anyway, of these 92,000 that we've received, a little less than 15% of them have exceeded the 5 part per billion action level. That's the new action level for the past 4 years or so. 63% of those were from consumption outlets and 37% from non-consumption outlets. And we think that that's largely because the consumption outlets, all of those have to be tested, but the non-consumption outlets, signage in some cases is acceptable if they have not been tested. It's required on any outlet. The only outlets that are not required to be either tested or signed, posted with acceptable signage that indicates that it is not to be used for drinking or hand washing only, would be shower heads and eye washes. I saw a hand go up, but I missed the question.
No, it was just somebody leaving, notifying them had to leave.
Okay. So this is what we have on our website is a little bit more deep than this, more comprehensive. In terms of the overall universe, what we've gotten from the schools, this would include stuff that's been sent in but has not been validated yet fully and put up on the website. What we've seen is over 90% of public schools in all 24 school districts have been tested. That number is 60% for non-public schools and 70% for charter schools. One thing I want to point out, and again, I would like to compliment the schools on their efforts in doing this testing, because as I've discussed today, it is a lot of work. There was no money associated with this initiative. The public schools have a leg up with this over the non-public ones in that almost all the counties, the school districts are the counties in Baltimore City, and almost all of them, with the exception of Baltimore City, do have some schools that have their own wells, and they are familiar with the overall procedures of testing drinking water and to maintain compliance with the Federal Safe Drinking Water Act. And, they know the basics about this. The private schools, on the other hand, with many of them, they may be very small. The responsibility for overseeing this whole effort often falls on somebody who has not, doesn't have this kind of a background. So we always want to emphasize to the school personnel that we are available for all the questions, and we will walk them through all of this as much as they want to or need us to for this.
And we had a question from Christine. Is there a penalty for not reporting compliance?
There is no specified enforcement mechanism for this. What we've seen really, I think the intention was for it to be basically a sunshine law. Parents know about it and they ask questions and they follow up when they hear about the elevated lead levels. There is an annual report to the governor, which among other things does indicate which schools have tested that year, along with the elevated lead levels that have been reported. A school that is not in compliance won't be in that report, but it's not like under federal, safe drinking water rules where violations are issued. There isn't that. We really just try to work with the schools to do it and to do it as well as can be done. Of these schools that are not within this 90 or 60 or 70% within the various categories, that does include schools that may be providing bottled water, or they may have the updated plumbing that's considered lead free. There are a lot of schools that are inactive, whether that's permanently or temporarily. Schools close. There are schools that they're called swing buildings or swing space schools, where they're doing renovation with while they're moving students to a number of other schools. Yes, the presentation's been provided and should be included in the follow-up materials for the meeting. And anybody's free to email me at MDE with any questions that you may have as well. So I believe that's pretty much it for my presentation per se, but I'd like to offer the opportunity for any questions that the group might have. And thank you very much for this opportunity. Christine?
I put another question in the chat. It was just the data you had was from 2021, and you said it's a 3-year compliance where they report every 3 years. So would there be additional data then this year on your website related to?
Well, the data on our website should be current through January 7th of this year. And
no, I think your report at one of your slides said 2021, so I just wasn't sure if that's.
There may be a mistake then, but I think in 2020, the only reference I remember for 2021 was when HB 636 went into effect that lowered the action level. But yeah, we get data as the schools conduct the testing, and we review it, and we process it. Every year we wind up sending out notices to the schools to remind them of their requirements and to send their results in so that we can get the information into the governor's report as applicable.
Okay, I see it. It was when the law went into effect for the per parts. That's what I noticed before. So,
okay.
Presentation.
Any other questions? Let me look in the chat because I have not.
Yeah, there's nothing else in the chat as far as questions. Anybody else? If not, we will have Fred take over. Oh, wait, we have Nadia Hutchinson.
Yes.
Yeah. Tim, I have one last question.
Sure.
Has there been any talk, or is there interest in expanding the number of schools to include like early childhood centers?
Well, the lead and copper rule revisions will require that under the child care centers will be required to conduct sampling. And the schools that are not regulated under the state law, but are regulated under the federal lead and copper rule will be required to collect 5 samples rather than just the representative samples that is the current case. So that is expanding. We work under the rubric of this legislation, which at this point does not include child care centers. Carrie? I think you may be muted.
Yes, sorry about that. What are your, first of all, thank you for your presentation. One of your slides, you have the note on there that I think it's of the 24 districts in Maryland, that it's actually after the testing was less than 15% actually tested tested at the action level. Is that true? Wait a minute. My screen is messed up here. And the reason why I'm asking is, to me, 15% is a high number.
Well, it is. I mean, we want to get rid of, the whole idea is we want those outlets with the potential to contribute lead, we want them addressed, whether that means being removed or remediated. The biggest bang for the buck of this has been the first round of testing. That's really when the ones that are egregious outlets get identified and addressed.
Okay, and this data point here, this applies to all, whether it's public, non-public, or charter, right?
Correct.
All the schools. Okay, that's a lot of. Okay, and so this is this a priority for your kind of team to kind of go after?
Well, yes.
These schools.
I mean, we have a division, the lead and copper and drinking water division, that's 12 people, and we have that's an increase from about half that over the past couple of years, and it's about split in terms of full-time equivalents between the federal lead and copper rule and the this particular initiative with schools, and we are quite busy. The important thing to note about this, though, is once those outlets are identified, they are required to be taken out of service within 24 hours of the school having been notified by the lab, and they must not be put back into service until they have conducted remediation and conducted follow-up sampling that demonstrates that they are no longer above that action level.
Okay, thank you.
Good. Christina?
I just want to get back to Nadi's comment about childcare programs. There is some specific regulation around testing wells and family childcare and different things. And Mangela's on here; she could speak to that. But there are other regulations around the childcare center specifically, just to bring that up.
Oh, yes. In terms of lead in drinking water, I thought that was what you're right. Michael? Michael, you may be muted.
I got a question if any one water supplier was found to be linked to the ones that exceeded the 5 parts per billion.
We have not noticed that. Generally, what we notice as the biggest correlate in this, and again, we are still in the process of beefing up our data analysis capabilities, and we haven't done any, thorough statistical analyses of any of these things. But what we really see as the driver of this is older school buildings. The newer the school building is, the less likely it is to have plumbing with significant lead in it, I guess.
And with the lead incident that happened in Flint, Michigan, the problem was switching from a water supply treated with an anti-corrosive to one that wasn't. Do they use anti-corrosives in Maryland water supplies, or is that not necessary?
Oh, well, that's a little bit out of my expertise. I work more on this law than the federal lead and copper rule, but we do, the lead and copper rule is engineered to identify system-wide corrosivity issues, and the water suppliers with that are required to do corrosion control studies and implement corrosion control. Most of the larger ones have it in just basically as a matter of course.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're right about the Flint issue, and that was also a lot of that was coming from service lines, which, as you may know, there's a push under the lead and copper rule revisions to remove those service lines. And I would like to just mention about schools. Schools tend to be pretty heavily supplied with water for firefighting purposes, among other things, and larger buildings in general. I would never say it's impossible, but it's unlikely that they have lead service lines, because the lead service lines were only up to a certain diameter and generally aren't used in larger buildings that have more water supply.
Right. Yeah. With Flint, it was corrosive water going through lines that put way too much lead into the drinking water there. Thank you.
Welcome.
Anybody else? Okay. Thank you very much for your presentation, Tim.
Thank you very much. Again, any questions for me or my team, just feel free to shoot me an email.
Okay.
Thank you.
Let me see if is there a way to stop your presentation?
Yes, I will stop sharing my screen.
There you go. Thank you.
And I will turn my camera off so you don't have to look at me.
All right, Fred. I can pull up the agenda for you.
Yeah, please. All right, agency hot topics, MDE. I don't have anything that we haven't already discussed. We do have some policies being looked at for the legislative session. We just finished 2024. It was an extremely busy year for us. We are trying to recruit for more inspectors. We met with EPA yesterday, and we're going to host a lead workshop this summer for Region 3, which includes West Virginia, Pennsylvania, DC, Delaware, and Virginia. And so this is lead professionals. We probably going to have work with Dr. Mitchell to have MDH there as well. But the goal is just to try to look at some different strategies for funding, training and development for inspectors, and just overall where we are as far as lead prevention in Region 3. So we think that'll be a good event. So I'll turn it over to Dr. Mitchell for MDH updates.
Dr. Mitchell, you're on mute.
My apologies. I had a thing to do, but yes. So we are still in the process of doing our evaluation of the home visiting program with our Medicaid partners. We actually have, as Fred probably mentioned, a nurse case manager meeting this afternoon, where we'll be meeting with the lead case managers. We actually are slated to receive some additional funding from the Association of State and Territorial Health Officials to support lead case management in our jurisdictions that are not funded to receive Medicaid CHIP funding. So that there are 13 jurisdictions that will be receiving additional funding through ASTO through July 31st of this year for lead case management services. And we'll be notifying them probably within the next week about what that looks like. I will say, with respect to the work that the case managers are doing, we probably and this is something I think we're going to be discussing with Dr. Boss Victoria and Fred. What we may want to do at some point is provide the commission with some of the and with respect to the chair, we may want to have another session where we ask some of the outlying jurisdictions, not Baltimore City, to come in and present on some of their more difficult, challenging / interesting cases, to have a picture of what lead case management looks like around the state. So I'm guessing that I think both MDE and we would be happy to work with the local health departments to have another presentation by some of the local health departments.
Okay, thanks, Dr. Mitchell. Dr. Mike?
Thanks, Glenn.
Yes, thank you. First of all, I'd just like to say personally, I feel very privileged to be a part of this commission now and look forward to working with everyone here over the next few years on helping to continue to work to eliminate lead poisoning in children. I did want to mention to the committee that one of the bills we supported last year, which was known as Rudy's Law, was to have baby food tested for heavy metals, including lead. That first phase of that went into effect January 1st of this year, which was requiring the food manufacturers to test a representative batch of their product for lead, cadmium, mercury, and arsenic. And a year from now, they'll be required to have labeling that allows consumers to go to their website and find the results of that. So, that's a big step in the right direction to correct a problem with lead in food that was quite a problem last year. I had a question for Cliff as to whether you have any information on whether practices, clinics across the state have access to the Lead Care 2 machines or not, if there's any data as to how widely they're being used, because it is really a game changer for getting kids tested, having it in office versus having to send them to a lab for an actual venous draw. So I don't know if you have that information or if that might be something worth pursuing.
So we actually, I think, can get, so two things. One is I believe that MDE, Fred, Dr. Banks, correct me if I'm wrong, but in the past, Magellan actually used to notify you when Lead Care 2s were being used in the state. And I don't know if they're still doing that. However, what's supposed to happen is that the Laboratories Administration is supposed to issue a letter when the Lead Care 2s go into a clinical setting, because they are not exempt from all provisions of CLIA. They still have to be registered with the practice still has to be approved to use that machine in that setting. So if MDE does not have a listing, I can probably work with the Laboratories Administration to get a list of all of the folks who have been issued letters for that.
Yeah, I can remember when I was in practice, we did have to go through the process of having our staff trained formally and submitting registration for the CLIA, be able to do the CLIA approval.
It's a CLIA waived test.
Yeah.
Fred, do you know, are you guys still getting from Magellan?
So we're getting, on the lab results, we do see what instrument was used. So, but it's not a list of.
It's not a list of all the people who have instruments.
No.
All right. Perhaps you and I can touch base, and I can work with, and Mike, I'm happy to talk to you as well about this. We can approach the Laboratories Administration about seeing how many letters they've issued and where.
Okay, that sounds good. So I think if one way to get testing numbers up would be to have the Lead Care 2 machines adopted as widely as possible across the state.
Yeah, I think we eternally struggle with the problem of with this. Number one, the reporting by the providers who are using Lead Care 2s to the registry is complicated and a real challenge compared with venous testing that goes through national laboratories for reasons that historically have to do with both at the provider end and then also at the MDE end in terms of data entry. And Fred, I don't know if you want to talk more about that, but I think those are both the big challenges.
Yeah, we just had a conversation about this yesterday because we're trying to work with our IT department to create a lab portal for the labs that are still sending us paper lab results, and we were wondering if the Magellan had the capacity to upload the results directly to MDE in some way, shape, or form when that test occurs. So I'm not sure how ridiculous that sounds, but just to take it to the environmental side, the XRFs that we use to do testing, when the inspectors are out in the field, they can just take a USB and plug that. When they get back, plug that XRF right into the computer, and it uploads. They can do 5-6 inspections, and it'll download a report directly into their laptop. So
That's been the challenge with the lead care 2s from the very, very beginning, is the lack of an interface.
Right. So, okay. All right. Thanks, Mike. Mangela.
Okay, guys, just as an FYI, we have about 10 minutes left. So
Wendy.
let's try not to go over time. Mangela?
Thank you, Wendy. I do not have any hot topics to report. However, I'd like to respond to Nadia's question in reference to childcare water testing. The Office of Childcare has the already multifaceted COMA requirements for providing safe drinking water from the approved source and environmental testing to make sure that the lead safe environment is ensured all the time. And also the toys and sleep equipments and other equipments that are used in childcare are consumer safety approved products. And in addition, we are working with the MDE to devise a plan to recruit childcare programs for volunteer testing. More information to come. Thank you.
Thanks, Mangela. Benita Cooper.
Nothing to report for the MIM.
Okay. Nicole Tran.
Okay, she must have left. Anybody else from Department of Housing, Community Development on?
I am on. Sorry, it's Jack Daniels. I apologize. Nicola actually is out of the office sick
Oh, that's
today.
right.
So I apologize for that. Not a whole lot from our end. I did just I unfortunately had to jump on a little bit late. I was about 20 minutes late coming from another meeting to fill in for Nicola, but just sort of for notification purposes, we have been notified that we have received a $2 million Healthy Homes production grant that we had submitted roughly around November. We did finally receive notification with sort of more information to follow. And we are currently in the process of our negotiation period with HUD and the Office of Lead Hazard Control for the $4 million lead hazard reduction grant that we had applied for. So been pretty busy from those pieces of it. And as we get more information, we'll give an update back to the commission.
Thanks. Nicole Hart.
It looks like she had to jump off. Is there anybody else from Housing and Community Development, Baltimore City?
Yes, this is Nikia Randall. I'm here. We are still in the negotiation phase for the new lead hazard grant, and we don't have any updates at this moment. Any questions can be directed to Catherine Taylor, and she'll get back to you as soon as possible.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Camille Burke had to step off. Julie left the department in December, and she's Camille said they're in the process finalizing the new director, and they should have that new director on board and ready to go by the end of the month.
Okay, thank you for that.
All right, Nadia.
Yeah, no, sorry, I'm really recovering from this cold. No updates on our front. We usually kind of have a little downtime with door knocking when there's snow on the streets, but hoping that we'll get back to door knocking for the lead service lines in the coming weeks.
Okay, thank you. Shadi, you want to take over for everything for GHHI?
Sure, absolutely. Hi, everyone. My name is Shadi Musa. I'm the Outreach Education Manager with GHHI. Just briefly, just wanted to say, we're getting started with our MDE grant with our tenant-based lead education, outreach and education, as well as hiring a lawyer to do tenant-based lawyer representation. So yeah, we're in the works of doing that. Really excited to get somebody on board. If you know anybody, please let me know. But yeah, really excited to get that going. So thank you. That's all the updates we have on GHHI's front.
Okay, thanks. Any updates from the commissioners?
I just had a question. Are there any updates on the lead levels being available in Immunet for Cliff? But we can talk about it offline if it's.
No, just for everybody's benefit, for the people who don't know, because they're new on the commission, a number of years ago, we built into the immunization registry a placeholder for lead level data from the Maryland Childhood Lead Registry. So the way this works is lead data from the registry are cut on a regular basis, sent to Medicaid and and MDH, and those are loaded into Immunet, the immunization registry available to healthcare providers. That process is still taking place, right, Fred?
Yes. Yeah.
So so Barbara, I think that if there's a problem on the Immunet side, I have not heard about it.
Okay.
I'll check on it today and see if there's something going on, and I'll get back to you by this afternoon if that works.
Okay. Right now, Immunet's having technical difficulties again. I got that email this morning, but every time I've looked, the lead levels aren't there.
Okay.
So, yeah, I mean, it would have depended when they were done, because if they are recent lead levels, then there is a time delay between the time that the registry gets the lead, the time that they cut the data and export it and send it to the Department of Health, and the time that it's uploaded and processed into Immunet.
Right. These aren't all recent.
These are not all recent.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. I'll check on our end and make sure we've sent everything, and then I'll, like I said, I'll get back to you this afternoon if it's a technical issue on either Immunet's side or on our side.
Okay. And Fred, let me know if you need some examples.
Okay.
Yeah, and if you send them to Fred, send them to me.
Yep.
And Fred, if you have any updates, I'll also talk to our Immunet people as well and ask them if there's anything going on.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks. Any comments from the public? Any updates? All right. Thanks a lot, guys. Looks like our next meeting is February 6th, 9:30. We will be have an in-person option. We'll be on the 6th floor. So we'll have somebody from the lead program down in the lobby escorting people up as they come in. If you want to come in, try to let Wendy know at least a week in advance if you're going to come in person, so we can make arrangements to see if we need to find a larger space if that's an issue, but that shouldn't be an issue.
Yeah, so from here on out, the 6th floor Patuxent conference room, it's because we're having all these technical difficulties in the other conference rooms. So we're gonna, this has the most updated equipment and stuff. So yeah, hopefully if you just make a note of that, we'll be in a hybrid meeting on February 6th, and we look forward to seeing everybody. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Thank you.
You take care, everyone.